The story begins in a remote, snow-covered region of Finland 24 days before Christmas. An American company called Sub-Zero was secretly drilling into a mountain known as Confrontation. One of the company's employees, Mr. Green, informed his boss, Riley, that they had discovered a large amount of sawdust nearly 400 meters below the surface. Finding so much sawdust at such a great depth was extremely unusual. Riley was thrilled because this was exactly what he had been searching for. He explained that in ancient times, sawdust was used to preserve ice for long periods. This meant the mountain was not an ordinary one, but a massive natural freezer. Something had been hidden beneath it for centuries. Riley already seemed to know exactly what was buried below. A short distance away, two local boys, Peter and Juuso, were secretly watching everything from behind a stack of crates. Juuso understood a little English, so he carefully listened to Riley's conversation. A few moments later, Riley gathered his entire team and announced that his childhood dream was finally about to come true. According to him, the mountain was actually a giant tomb built thousands of years ago by the local people. He believed that the real Santa Claus had been imprisoned inside it. Not the cheerful old man who delivers presents every Christmas, but the terrifying original Santa. Riley ordered his team to excavate the mountain before Christmas arrived. They had only 24 days to finish the job. If necessary, they were even allowed to use explosives. Hearing this, Peter and Juuso panicked. They quickly escaped through a gap in the fence they had made earlier. On the way home, Peter was deeply frightened. Juuso, however, laughed and insisted that there was no such thing as a real Santa. He said the Santa who visited children every Christmas was simply a villager wearing a costume. But Peter refused to believe him. That night, he searched through several old books about Santa and began reading them. Soon, he came across a terrifying old legend. In the story, Santa had horns on his head and walked barefoot through the snow. He carried a long wooden staff in his hand. Instead of bringing gifts, he punished naughty children. From that day on, Christmas became a season of fear for Peter instead of joy and celebration. 3 weeks passed, and Christmas Eve finally arrived. Early that morning, Peter's father, Rauno, dug a deep pit near their house to trap wolves. He placed sharp wooden stakes at the bottom of the pit. Afterward, he covered it with branches and snow before placing a severed pig's head on top as bait. Rauno then threw snowballs at Peter's window to wake him up. But Peter had barely slept all night. His room was filled with books about the frightening Santa legend. As soon as he looked out of the window, he froze in shock. Bare footprints were visible on the roof just outside his window. Terrified, Peter rushed to his father's butcher shop. The shop was filled with hanging meat, forcing him to close his eyes. Nervously, he asked Rauno if he had been on the roof that morning. His father replied that he had not. He told Peter to stop worrying because it was time to gather the reindeer. A little later, Rauno and Peter met the other reindeer herders, including Huso, his father Aimo, and Piparinen. Before leaving, Rauno handed Peter a loaded rifle. He warned that the explosions on the mountain might drive wolves into the area. During the journey, Peter told Juuso that Santa had appeared outside his window the previous night. Juuso simply laughed, believing it was nothing more than another scary story. Soon, everyone began waiting for the reindeer herd to arrive. The reindeer were their only source of income and their means of surviving the harsh winter. But this time, instead of the full herd, only 2 frightened reindeer appeared. Everyone immediately jumped onto their snowmobiles and rushed to search for the others. When they reached the fence near the mountain, they were horrified. Their entire herd of reindeer was lying dead across the snow. Overnight, their livelihood had been completely destroyed. The damage was estimated at nearly 85,000 euros, pushing many families toward financial ruin. At first, everyone believed wolves were responsible. Then they noticed a damaged section of the fence. It was the same opening Peter and Juuso had secretly made earlier. Juuso quietly signaled Peter to stay silent. He knew that if the adults learned they had gone near the mountain, both boys would be in serious trouble. Rauno and the others began suspecting that the American drilling crew was responsible. They also considered the possibility that someone had entered the restricted area and slaughtered the animals on purpose. Then Peter noticed something no one else had seen. Beneath one of the dead reindeer, he found a set of bare footprints in the snow. They were exactly like the footprints outside his bedroom window. At that moment, Peter became certain that whatever had done this had come from beneath the mountain. It was definitely not a wolf. Furious, Rauno decided to confront the drilling company and demand an explanation. Armed with rifles, he and the other herders forced their way through the gate and rode their snowmobiles toward the drilling site. But when they arrived at the site, they found the entire camp completely deserted. The office was empty and all the equipment and personal belongings had been left behind. It looked as if Riley and his team had fled in a great hurry. Inside the office, Peter discovered a detailed diagram. The drawing showed a massive tomb buried deep inside the mountain. At that moment, Peter realized they had not been drilling for minerals or conducting research. They had actually uncovered an ancient tomb. Before leaving, everyone gathered near the enormous hole in the mountain. Rauno threw a flare into the dark pit to see how deep it was. The hole was so deep that the flare's light barely reached the bottom. It was obvious that whatever had once been trapped beneath the mountain was incredibly huge, and now it was gone. After returning home, Rauno tried to act as though everything was normal. He wanted Christmas to continue like every other year, but nothing felt the same anymore. The reindeer were gone. There was no money left, and something mysterious had been released from beneath the mountain. Meanwhile, Peter carefully shut every window in his room. He even put on his hockey pads to protect himself. Juuso still refused refused to believe Peter's story. To convince him, Peter showed him illustrations from the old books. One of the pictures showed a wild, horned man walking barefoot through the snow. Peter also revealed the diagram he had secretly taken from the drilling office. Everything slowly began to make sense. Long ago, the local people must have feared this terrifying creature because it kidnapped naughty children. One day, they came up with a clever plan to stop it. They lured the creature onto a frozen lake. When it stepped onto the ice, the surface cracked beneath its weight. The creature sank into the freezing water, and the lake froze over once again. Later, the villagers removed the enormous block of ice with the creature trapped inside. They buried it deep beneath the mountain forever. Over time, that burial site became the mountain everyone now knew. Even after hearing the story, Yuso still didn't believe it. Peter, however, was completely convinced it was true. He suggested they confess to the adults that they had made the hole in the fence. He believed their mistake might have started everything, but Yuso refused immediately. He said that if their parents learned the truth, they would both be in serious trouble. Downstairs, Rauno prepared a simple Christmas meal with gingerbread and milk. There was no happiness on his face. While eating, Peter quietly said, "This tastes just like Mom used to make." Hearing those words, Rauno turned his face away to hide the tears in his eyes. After a moment, Peter softly asked, "Am I a good boy?" Then he asked another heartbreaking question. "Would anyone even care if I suddenly disappeared?" Rauno couldn't find the words to answer. Instead, he simply told Peter to go to bed. That night, Peter sat beside the window, staying alert. He tightly held a bunch of keys in his hand. He hoped that if he accidentally fell asleep, the keys would drop and wake him. Eventually, exhaustion overcame him. The keys slipped from his hand and he drifted off to sleep. At the same time, the situation at the drilling site had turned into a nightmare. A worker named Brian desperately contacted Riley over the radio. He begged him to stop the operation. Brian warned that the thing they had uncovered was nothing like Riley had imagined. It was alive. Every worker at the site was terrified, but Riley ignored the warning. He refused to listen to Brian. He gave only one order: "Bring that thing to me no matter what." Seconds later, terrified screams echoed throughout the camp. Brian then noticed someone slowly walking toward him through the darkness. The figure's bare feet were clearly visible on the snow. The next morning was Christmas Day, yet there was still no sign of celebration in Rauno's home. The food had burned. Even the fire refused to burn properly. As Rauno tried to light it again, something suddenly exploded inside the chimney. Hearing the blast, Peter rushed downstairs carrying his weapon. It turned out Peter had secretly built a small trap inside the chimney. Confused, Rauno asked what was happening. Peter calmly replied that he had set the trap to protect the house. He didn't want anyone entering through the chimney. A little later, they stepped outside. They immediately noticed that the pig's head hanging above the wolf trap had disappeared. Peter shouted for Rauno at once. As they approached the trap, Rauno first noticed a few white feathers inside, but when he looked more closely, he saw a human hand. Without saying anything, he quickly pulled Peter away. He lied and claimed there was only a large bird inside, but Peter realized his father was hiding the truth. Just then, Piperinen arrived dressed as Santa Claus to wish Peter a Merry Christmas. Before he could say anything, Rauno stopped him and asked for help. From a distance, Peter watched the two men drag a large sack toward the slaughterhouse. When they opened it, they found a frail old man inside. He was extremely thin with pale skin and a long white beard. An American passport was found inside his jacket. The passport identified him as Brian Green. Rauno and Piperinen were shocked. They immediately realized he was one of the missing workers from the drilling site. One of the missing American workers had become a serious problem. The biggest issue was that the trap Rauno had built was illegal. He had never received permission to set it. If anyone discovered that an American had been caught in that trap, Rauno's life would be ruined. He and Piperinen began discussing how they could hide the entire incident. Meanwhile, Peter secretly returned to the trap. There he found a large potato sack, but instead of potatoes, it contained a creepy wooden doll. The disturbing discovery frightened him even more. Peter quietly made his way back to the slaughterhouse and looked inside through the window. Rauno and Piperinen were still discussing what to do with the old man. Suddenly, one of the old man's fingers began to move. A moment later, he slowly started breathing again. Then, like a wild animal, he sniffed the air. Slowly, he turned his head and looked directly at Peter standing outside the window. Terrified, Peter ran away. Rauno immediately chased after him. He feared Peter might tell everyone what had happened. Peter ran toward the main road. Just then, the sheriff's van happened to be passing by. He quickly climbed inside and Rauno followed. The sheriff then drove both of them to Amo's house. There, they discovered that someone had broken into the barn during the night. Surprisingly, the thieves had stolen every potato sack but left all the potatoes behind. The sheriff explained that the same strange theft had happened throughout the village. The thieves had taken anything that could produce heat, including stoves, heaters, and even hair dryers. In several houses, they had even broken through the walls to get inside. Imo believed the American drilling crew was responsible. He angrily claimed they must have been building some kind of strange machine. Rauno, however, didn't want to stay there any longer. His only concern was getting Peter home before anyone started asking too many questions. Meanwhile, Peter had reached a different conclusion. Everything was beginning to make sense to him, that whatever had escaped from the mountain was collecting every possible source of heat. He also became convinced that someone was kidnapping all the village children. Before Rauno could leave, Peter ignored the adults and rushed straight to Yuso's room. At first, he thought Huso was sleeping under a blanket, but when he pulled the blanket away, away, he froze in shock. Juzo wasn't there. Instead, the same creepy wooden doll lay on the bed. It looked exactly like the one Peter had found near the wolf trap. Peter immediately ran to the sheriff and told him everything. The sheriff simply laughed. He assumed Juzo was playing a prank. He believed nothing unusual could happen in their quiet little village. As soon as the sheriff left, Rauno asked Aimo for help. He explained that the strange old man locked inside the slaughterhouse was probably connected to the drilling company. Since Aimo spoke English, he hoped he could question him. Meanwhile, Piperinen was keeping watch over the old man. He was casually eating a gingerbread cookie. The moment the old man smelled the cookie, he began sniffing the air like a wild animal. Piperinen thought the old man was trying to say something. He leaned closer without realizing the danger. Suddenly, the old man attacked him. A short time later, Rauno, Aimo, and Peter returned. They found Piperinen badly shaken and injured. He insisted that the old man wasn't behaving like a normal human being. Hearing this, Aimo grabbed his rifle and entered the slaughterhouse. Inside, the old man was sitting naked in a corner, quietly chewing on something. Aimo questioned him in English several times. The old man remained completely silent. Rauno then poked him with a broomstick. Even then, he showed no reaction. The adults concluded that he was only pretending to be weak and harmless. Soon they came up with a new plan. They decided to keep the old man hostage and demand compensation from the drilling company for the loss of their reindeer. While the adults discussed their plan, Peter began calling every house in the village. Everywhere he received the same answer. Not a single child was at home. Alarmed, Peter rushed to Rauno and told him everything. He also confessed another secret. He admitted that he and Juzo had cut the fence near the mountain. Then he handed his father a small wooden switch and said, "If you want to punish me, you can." Peter explained that the mysterious creature had taken away all the naughty children. He believed everything had started the day the mountain was excavated. Just then, Piperinen called everyone back into the slaughterhouse. When they entered, they saw that the old man had completely chewed through the broomstick. The moment Peter walked inside, the old man's behavior changed. He immediately stood up and stared directly at Peter without blinking. Peter then said something no one wanted to believe. He claimed the old man already knew every child in the village. He had been watching them for a long time. After taking all the other children, he had now come for Peter. At first, none of the adults believed a single word he said, but when they noticed the old man staring at Peter like a hunter watching its prey, their smiles quickly disappeared. As he slowly began walking toward Peter, everyone realized the danger was real. Without hesitation, Aimo fired his rifle. The group quickly overpowered the old man and restrained him with heavy chains. A short while later, they all sat around him, calmly eating Christmas cookies as if nothing unusual had happened. Suddenly, the radio inside the old man's jacket crackled to life. On the other end was Riley. He still believed his team was alive and that the cargo was ready for transport. He informed them that a helicopter was on its way. He also ordered them to have Santa ready for pickup. After hearing this, Rauno came up with a new plan. He believed that if Riley wanted this mysterious creature so badly, he would have to pay for it. Their reindeer business had suffered a loss of nearly 85,000 euros. Rauno was determined to recover every cent. The group dressed the old man in Piparinen's Santa Claus costume. Then they locked him inside a sturdy iron cage. After that, they drove toward the mountain. Throughout the journey, the old man never stopped staring at Peter. When they finally arrived, Rauno instructed Peter to remain inside the truck. A few moments later, a helicopter landed nearby. Riley stepped out and approached them. Rauno demanded 85,000 euros in exchange for the captive. Riley calmly replied, "Show me the cage first." As soon as the cage was brought before him, Riley looked deeply into the old man's eyes. For a brief moment, he seemed completely captivated. Then he slowly turned away and revealed a shocking truth. He explained that the prisoner was not Santa Claus. He was only one of Santa's ancient helpers. Rauno demanded the money again. Instead of paying, Riley ordered everyone to lower their weapons. He told them to stay quiet and remain calm. According to him, the real danger was still out there. Suddenly, every light on the mountain went out. At the same moment, the helicopter pilot let out a terrified scream. As darkness surrounded them, everyone realized they had walked straight into a deadly trap. Riley warned that the real Santa would choose the worst among them. His words made the situation even more terrifying. Rauno, Aimo, and Piperinen immediately stood back to back with their guns ready. In the darkness, they saw dozens of pale old figures silently watching them across the snow. These were not cheerful Christmas helpers. They were terrifying ancient creatures protecting their master. Without warning, one of the creatures rushed toward Riley. Everyone immediately opened fire. Chaos erupted across the mountain. During the confusion, Rauno noticed something even more frightening. Peter had disappeared. Without wasting a second, Rauno ran toward the large warehouse, convinced his son had gone inside. Aimo and Piparinen followed him and quickly shut the doors to keep the creatures out. But what they found inside shocked them. A massive horned creature was trapped inside a gigantic block of ice. It was nothing like the friendly Santa from children's stories. It looked like a terrifying ancient beast. Around the ice block were heaters, stoves, and other heating equipment stolen stolen from the village. The creatures had gathered everything to melt the ice and free their master. Just then, they heard children crying from inside several potato sacks. Amo immediately tore the sacks open. Inside were the missing village children. Everyone finally realized the creatures had kidnapped them so Santa could punish them. Piperinen quickly began switching off every heater. Meanwhile, Rauno struggled to hold the warehouse door shut as the creatures repeatedly tried to force their way inside. Even so, the ice continued cracking little by little. The situation quickly spiraled out of control. Peter remained surprisingly calm as he watched everything unfold. He suddenly fired a shot into the air, grabbing everyone's attention. Then he explained that they had to complete 2 missions at the same time. First, they had to rescue all the children. Second, they had to destroy Santa before the creature became completely free. Peter explained that as long as the children remained nearby, the creatures would never stop chasing them. And as long as Santa stayed alive, no child would ever be safe. Piperinen was the only person who knew how to fly the helicopter. He grabbed several packs of gingerbread cookies and ran outside. The moment the creatures smelled the cookies, they rushed toward them like starving animals. Using the distraction, Piperinen climbed into the helicopter and started the engine. Meanwhile, Rauno and Amo placed all the rescued children inside a large cargo net. The helicopter lifted the net through an opening in the roof. Peter climbed into the net as well. He knew his plan would only work if the creatures followed the children. As soon as the creatures saw the children being carried away, they abandoned the warehouse and chased the helicopter into the forest. Now their mission had split into 2 parts. High above the forest, Peter guided Piperinen over the radio while using the children as bait to lure the creatures away. At the same time, back inside the warehouse, Rauno and Imo dug several holes in the snow and planted sticks of dynamite inside them. Before leaving, they used a chainsaw to cut off the creatures' large horns, believing they might be valuable. Meanwhile, Piperinen flew the helicopter straight toward the reindeer enclosure. Peter's plan was working perfectly. He intended to trap the creatures just like a herd of wild animals. However, there was one major problem. The gate to the reindeer enclosure was still closed. The creatures were getting closer every second. Piperinen shouted over the radio, warning Peter that they were running out of time. Peter realized the gate could only be opened from the ground. Without hesitation, he jumped from the cargo net. He rushed to the heavy gate and pulled it open. Then he switched on the electric fence, sealing off the creature's only escape route. After that, he stood his ground and waited for them. Over the radio, he calmly said, "If I don't make it back, tell my father that his son fought bravely." Meanwhile, Rauno and Imo had driven their truck a safe distance away from the warehouse. Once they were far enough, Rauno pressed the detonator. A massive explosion tore through the warehouse. The blast completely destroyed the giant frozen creature before it could fully escape from the ice. At the same time, Peter stood near the reindeer enclosure with his eyes closed as the creatures rushed toward him. Surprisingly, they never attacked. Instead, they suddenly stopped and looked around in confusion. Their true master had been destroyed. Without him, they no longer knew what to do. Peter realized his plan had finally succeeded. The children were safe. The ancient monster was gone, and all of the creatures had been captured. Watching everything from the helicopter, Piperinen laughed with relief. He announced over the radio that the nightmare was finally over. Peter told him to take all the children home immediately. He wanted every child safely back in bed before sunrise. The following morning, Rauno, Imo, Piperinen, and Juso returned to the enclosure. There, they found Peter standing proudly beside the captured creatures. He had even counted every one of them. In total, they had captured 198 of the strange helpers. Afterward, they cleaned them up and gave them a completely new appearance. They trained them to be kind to children and deliver toys instead of causing fear. Eventually, they sent them all around the world as the new Santa Clauses. And that's how this unusual story comes to an end. What do you think about this unexpected ending? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.